So English is encoded as XHC2 for gate. For paper 1, that is your GA, General Aptitude, there will be total 10 questions of 15 marks. The marks distribution is like 5 questions will have 1 mark each, and another 5 questions will be there for 2 marks each. This is for paper 1, that is General Aptitude GA, just like you have in UGC-NET or Ph.D entrance tests of paper 1. However, it is only for 15 marks in GATE. Now let's come to English, which is your core subject, and for English there will be 85 marks and you have to attempt 65 questions in total. Means there will be questions based on options as well. You can choose the option which you want to attempt because you know certain options or certain questions better than the others. So you have this freedom over here. Also, let me revise what I told you in the last lecture, that English will have 3 types of questions. First one will be MCQs, that is multiple choice questions, which you all are familiar with, and these are the types of questions which are always there in most of the examinations like UGC-NET, PhD paper 1 entrance tests, UPSC prelims, etc. Also, there will be second type of questions. The second type is multi-select question or multiple select question, that is MSQs. So in MSQs or the multiple select questions, there will be more than one option that is correct, and you have to choose not only just one option but more than one, that is 2 or maybe 3 options which are correct for a given question. The third type of question is subjective, means you have to write paragraph based answers for the questions given. And I repeat again, there will be options, so you can sit back, relax, think which you want to attempt and which you don't want to attempt, because many a time it happens even in university exams. Whenever sometimes I check the papers and I often see that students have written 2 or 3 pages, then they cut the pages down because suddenly they realize that no, this is not the answer which I want to write, or this is not the question which I want to attempt. The other question is better for me, and then they start writing the other questions answers, and thereby not able to manage time. So don't be a bad manager, be a good manager. Don't mismanage your mental energy during the examination. Think before writing, think before choosing the question which you want to write, because giving options is easy for the students. I acknowledge that for GATE, but then the point is that it also confuses you. Okay, so be rest assured that this is the question which I want to attempt. Now quickly come back to the syllabus of English. So it talks about the multi-genre literatures in English like poetry, novel, other forms of fiction and non-fiction prose, including drama and story. So remember, when it talks about multi-genre, you have to remember that multi-genre literature is not just about the individual literary genres like poetry or the novel or say drama. It is about the correlation which can be established between all these genres amongst the genres of English literature. And how is it established? Let me tell you an example. You all know about the dramatic poetry, right? Dramatic poetry where drama influences poetry, a piece of poem. You know about the dramatic monologues written by poets, okay? Like you must have read the poem My Last Duchess. So My Last Duchess is an example where drama has influenced poetry because it is a form of dramatic monologue. Because monologue is not spoken in poetry, it is a form spoken in drama, right? However, it has influenced poetry. So that is why I told you that multi-genre literature does not mean the study of any kind of genre as its own individual existence. It talks about the interrelation amongst all the various kinds of literatures that we have in existence. Similarly, let's talk about novel. So apart from talking about novel as a genre and its history, the predecessors being the novella, the short forms of novel, and the novelette from the Italian tradition, we also have to talk about the fiction and non-fictitious novels, because there have been autobiographical or biographical novels. We have novels based on the series of letters called Pamela by Samuel Richardson. Okay, so we cannot forget these types of genres while talking about the multi-genre literatures, because Gate has already given us the hint that don't go by individual literatures only or literary forms only, go by the relations, establish a relativity between the various genres. So in the last lecture, I told my students that relativism is very important here. Go about relating, correlating, find the correlation between various genres. Okay, and if you have any issues, any problems, I'm there to help you. You can ask anytime. Now come to the next point, which is included in the first point only, but I think that we need to segregate it. It's 19th and 20th centuries literature. So 19th and 20th century literatures, Gate has chosen these two centuries basically because these are the two centuries. Till these points in time, English literature was already at its height. There was no need to introduce anything new in English literature. Okay, English literature had already gone through its critical phases. It had already seen the colonial times, the pre-colonial times. It had already seen the various criticisms of faced by the French culture. It had already seen the evolution in terms of its genres like poetry and novels. Stream of consciousness was dominating at the time of 20th century when we reached the modern forms of literature, that is novel. D.H. Lawrence came up with his own theory of novel, whereas Virginia Woolf and James Joyce, these groups of the modernists had to come up with their own stream of consciousness theory as far as novels are concerned. So almost all the genres came into their heights during the 19th and 20th centuries, and therefore we have the late romantics, the pre-Victorians, Victorians, and the modernists during this period of time. And we have to count on a few names which are indispensable. We cannot talk about these ages or English literature as a whole without noting down or quoting these authors. Remember, in UGC-NET also these names are very common, like Lord Byron, William Wordsworth, although they are romantics, but their influences on the later periods are very important, and that is why I'm mentioning their names. Now come later on to the later periods. We have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that is very important for the later romantic era, because at that point of time it introduces, or rather it reintroduces, the theory of sublime, the theory of sublimity in the novel Frankenstein. Okay, science was developing, and with this there was a criticism of science, of technology. So Frankenstein was written, and we also have the influence of the French Revolution of the previous century on this century, because French Revolution, when it started in 1789, it was already very late during that century. So it had its own influence in the 19th century, because the poets who were kids at that point of time could not write. Okay, this may sound funny, but this is real. They could not write. They heard the stories, and in the 19th century, when they were in their early 20s or 30s, they started writing about the French Revolution. Then come to the 20th century, we have names like T.S. Eliot, known for his Wasteland, which had an influence by the Indian tradition, or you can say the entire Eastern or the Asiatic tradition. He ends wasteland with Sanskrit words, and that is. So after Frankenstein, we have the 20th centuries. So during the 20th century literatures, we have the names like T.S. Eliot. And while going back to the previous century, that is 19th century, there is a novelist which is very important, which is placed also during the later romantics, during the Victorians, for the Victorians, and also for the moderns, because he has the traits, the characteristics. His novels have the characteristics of all these centuries. He is known for his tragic universality. He talks about the tragedy of human beings, and his famous line goes on like this from one of his novels, which you can guess, I think. And the line goes on like this: Life is but a general drama of pain with a few episodes of happiness. So this is the line which is very remarkable when we talk about human existence. These are the lines from Thomas Hardy's novel. Which is the novel? I'll not tell you. You have to find out the novels on your own. Now come to the next point, that is literary criticism and theory. While talking about literary criticism and theory, let me tell you that you should not get confused with it. Always remember that as the students of literature, you should know the difference between criticism and theory. And I told the difference about criticism and theory in my previous lectures to the registered batch, so at least they should know there is a difference between criticism and theory. But in the layman's language, in an ordinary language, we often use the two terms as synonymous, but that usage is wrong, because there is a difference between criticism and theory. They are not synonymous at all. Now coming ahead, we have cultural intellectual traditions. Means every theory is influenced by the contemporary cultural, socio-political, intellectual traditions or the dominant ideologies. Okay, remember Marxist critic Althusser, which is very important for UGC-NET and PhD entrance tests also. He remains important for GATE as well, because when we talk about Althusser, he was the one who redefined the term ideology. Ideology for him, or he defined ideology as any dominant intellectual or any dominant idea, any dominant opinion existing at one particular point of time by any class of society. Okay, so ideology for him was not just a group of ideas which a person or a group has, but it was the dominant idea, the dominant opinions which dominated the culture and society, which shaped the culture and society at a particular point of time. So in literary criticism and theory, we have structuralism. That is how I have made the syllabus for you. We'll have structuralism, then post-structuralism, talking about Saussure and Ferdinand de Saussure, and then we'll go about talking about deconstruction theory, reader response theory, which is a part of and parcel of reader response theory only. But reader response theory has its own various dimensions, like the cultural reader response, psychoanalytical reader response, historical reader response, etc. So we will talk about all these in great details, because there are questions in UGC-NET and PhD tests also on these, and no doubt GATE will also have the questions on reader response. Followed by them will be Marxist analysis, where we'll not just talk about Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, but go on to talk about simulacra, which is like the post-reality, the post-real era, which was coined by one of the Marxists only. Then talking about hegemony, coined by Antonio Gramsci in Italy. These are the phases of Marxism which we have to talk about, coming down to the present age of the post-truth or post-real media, okay, of televisions, magazines, and all. Then we have the post-colonial theory, which becomes very important while talking about the Anglophone literature. Remember, Anglophone literature actually is the study of the development of English in literature or in society. So here we will talk about the criticism faced by English as a language and culture during the colonial and post-colonial ages. And before the colonial age also, English as a culture faced many threats from the French culture, from France, from Spain, Germany, so on and so forth. So we will come down to the Marxist analysis of English as a language as well, and post-colonial literature, post-colonial analysis and criticism, wherein we have to talk about Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He is a very common name for almost all the examinations you can imagine in English, as a linguistic critic, as a languagist, and as a post-colonialist. Some of the key words which we have to talk about while studying Anglophone literature are literary criticism of English as a language, criticism of English as a culture, linguistic imperialism, linguistic domination, linguistic colonialism, so on and so forth. Then comes the English translation part. English translation, from this section, I'm sure you won't be having more than one question in multiple choice type or multiple select type. But yeah, be rest assured to read a few theorists. I'll give the detailed list of the theorists, important theorists of English translation. And remember that English translation as a study is nothing new. It goes back to the 1st century BCE, before Christian era, with the translation of Septuagint. It was the religious book of the Jews who had forgotten their language, and so this text was translated into the Greek language so that the new Jewish people can access the text. Okay, then come to Dryden's theories of translation, James Macpherson's theory. These are very important because Gate has already told you to read about English translation, and even if you don't read, then that's not the fault of Gate. So you have to read this. Coming down to Fitzgerald's translation of Omar Khayyam, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. So these are some of the very key points as far as translation is concerned. Next key point is literatures from India. So it has 3 sections basically. The first one is Indian literature, where the authors may or may not be Indian, the languages may not or may not be Indian, but the content, the focus has to be on India and its diaspora. Indian diasporic literature written by Jhumpa Lahiri and others, Anita Desai, these are also parts of Indian literatures. A common man would just simply say literatures from India or Indian literature, but as students of literature, of English literature, you should be able to define the difference between these three, between literatures in India, between Indian literature and Indian literature in English or Indian writing in English. Okay, second one is literatures from India, means these are written in India only, in Indian languages, and then translated into English. The third type of literature associated with India is Indian writing in English. I need not define Indian writing in English because anyone writing about India in the English language, not translation, mind it, in English language is Indian writing in English. Like Anita Desai writes in English, so she writes an Indian literature in English. Okay, similarly, if Amitabh Ghosh writes something, he writes in English. He is an Indian. He talks about India, so that is an Indian writing in English, extending to some degree to the larger subcontinent. And when we talk about the larger subcontinent, remember the subcontinent groups of countries which surround the Indian Ocean, geographically speaking. So have the knowledge of geography also. So Indian subcontinent means literature from Sri Lanka, countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, southern Afghanistan, and all. So but you know, the literatures from Pakistan remains somewhat important for a few writers whose names I'll be discussing, because it is not only about Indian subcontinent authors or literature in the present era, in the contemporary times, but it goes back to the pre-colonial eras as well. Because you know, Ismat Chugtai is everywhere. The Pakistani author about whom many of you must be knowing, she is everywhere in NET examination, in PhD, and so she will be there in GATE, because she was a revolutionary author. She taught, was the first woman, you know, in the Muslim world to be talking about homosexuality, right? And similarly, we cannot forget Sadat Hassan Manto while talking about Indian subcontinent author. So if GATE says that you have to talk about larger Indian subcontinent authors, just like you have questions in NET and PhD tests also, then they mean that you have to talk about Sadat Hassan Manto, you have to talk about Ismat Chugtai, a few Sri Lankan authors, one or two, and one or two Bangladeshi authors will be there. That's it, the list you will be getting. Okay, I have already shared the list with the registered batches, but yeah, I still tell you to get registered in with us, be in the common group with other students, so that you keep on getting the 100% materials. Although we want to help you, but then the point is that it's really difficult to share the contents at different places on different platforms. Okay, however, now come to the next point, research approaches and methodologies. Here, the students of ELT, that is English language teaching, and linguistics will be able to relate to this. NET introduced this as a new topic for its examination, UGC-NET, and so GATE has it. There is nothing to be surprised about this. And in this part, research approaches and methodologies, we don't only have to talk about the research, how to do research in English literature, because that is not a very special kind of thing. But what we have to talk about is the types in which English is taught, English as a language, not as a literature. So this part has been introduced so that the candidates and also the professors who are teaching them, they should be able to talk about English as a language as well, because primarily any literature comes from a language, a well defined language. So ESL, like in teaching of English as a second language, TESOL, right? English as second language, English for professionals, these are some of the newly coined terminologies, technical terms associated with research approaches and methodologies in English. And therefore we have the literary forms, because any language without literary forms cannot exist, and there is no language in the world without literary forms, obviously. And then literary devices, like the various devices, primarily speaking, everyone knows about simile and metaphors, but they are not limited to similes and metaphors only. You have to go to talk about the Japanese influence on English literature, the phonemes and morphemes, and similarly, then linguistics and phonetics as study of English language are very important. And in one of the lectures I talked about the different types of phonemes. Try to find it, or you can contact us, I'll provide you with that definition. Then various concepts and genres written in English language, and various concepts here means, various theories which are introduced by different critics, scholars, and theorists. in English language teaching as well as English language study. Remember, I'm not saying English literary studies, I'm saying English language studies. Okay. Then the last one, wow, this is really nice because everyone talks about this only in all the examinations. History of English literature, very conventional, traditional, well known, your favorite topic. So it's a history of English literature which is there, which has to be there. I don't know why they have kept it at the end, but this should be actually at the top. But anyways, not don't be afraid with this again bulky phrase, because when we talk about history of English literature, it is like, oh my god, there are so many things, it is never ending, it cannot end. So it is all about luck by chance in the examination. But it's not just about luck by chance, it's about collection and selection. Remember, in research we have the deduction theory, deductive approach, where you have many things, you come down to one particular thing. Okay, so keep deducing the things, delete other irrelevant things. And because I always tell the students, it is not important to know what you have to read. What is more important is to know what you don't have to read, so that you can save your time, you can save your energy. You read exactly what is needed, what is required for you to read, so that you can be confident in the examination. You can remember the things which you have studied, because you cannot remember thousands of things. It's better to remember five things than trying to remember 5,000 things and then failing. Okay, so for this you need a proper guide, and you have to be in touch with us, you have to be in touch with me about what you don't have to read. Remember, with time the importance of things also keep on changing. So don't read any bulky history of English literature, and don't go about reading the lists and lists of authors, poets, novelists, texts, characters from Wikipedia, from here and there. You can use any source you want to. I'm not saying don't use Wikipedia or any other source. You can use the sources, but know what you want to study, what you have to, and also you should know what you don't have to study. Now, English studies, I'm not going to talk about English studies because, when we talk about English studies, it's basically about English cultural studies only. And that is what makes us know that, what makes us conscious that English literature is not equal to English studies. They are not similar. Okay, recently people, the critics have said that English literature is not similar to English studies, and I agree to some extent, because English literature is really very vast and English studies is not that vast. English studies is mainly about the culture, not about the text, the author's poetry, and which incidents influenced which genre or which poet. Why was Shelley very much depressed at one point of time when he wrote that he's falling on the thorns? Remember his lines, um, I I bleed and I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. Okay, maybe French Revolution. He was very upset. So there is a difference between English literature and English studies, and I'll talk about this in the next lecture. Till then, I think that I have made a very detailed clarification on the subject pattern and the entire course structure for GATE as far as English is concerned. We have a common lecture series for NET, PhD entrance tests, and GATE. Okay, which you can join anytime. There is no time barrier, but you have to be really quick, because once the seats are over, I cannot allow you. Okay, and then you'll be losing most of the things. We have our own books also, 100% materials, which you have to get at any cost of time and energy, I mean, because without them GATE is not going to be yours. And remember, GATE is very important even for those who are in the in the final years of graduation, that is only the minimum criteria. You can get jobs in public sector units and various government organizations. Various government and non-governmental organizations are going to invite vacancies, and even some some other organizations as well, private also. Public sector units are already starting it based on the scores of your gate in English. Okay, so gate is very important for those who want a good job just after the graduation. So that's it for today's lecture. In the next class, I'll be talking about English translation, because I have not discussed it in detail right now. But this is again very important, because I have already told you how Dryden and Fitzgerald, they were Europeans, but they really dealt with the Eastern translation studies. There are various theories like Western theory of translation, Eastern theory, Chinese theory of translation, and these are the Buddhist theory of translation. So these are the theories which we have to deal with. Okay, so see you in the next lecture. I hope that you understood this lecture. If you have not, you can rewind the lecture, listen it again 2 or 3 times, or still if you don't understand, I am there. You can contact our counselors or contact me directly for any types of queries. But still, I suggest that you all be in one group with us, okay, as registered students, so that I can know which one is facing which problem, so that I can be attentive to each one of you, right? So see you in the next lecture. Till then, bye bye. And an announcement for the registered batch is that in the next lecture, I'll be dealing with the introduction on the 19th century literature. Okay, so be prepared with it, read something about it, so that you can be active in the class. Our online lectures are already highly interactive, I must appreciate that. So bye bye, take care, stay blessed.